going to tell you why are you doing this. That was not the case for me, and it's not the case for many people. It is going to be an emotional roller coaster. Hello and welcome to today's video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my own mental health experience during my PGCE year. And this is quite a popular topic, and lots of questions have come through towards how have I coped. I'm going to use coped during my PGCE year. How did I find it? How did I find the balance of personal life and work life? And hopefully I'm going to be answering all of those questions that I've received about this and also giving my experience. As a disclaimer, obviously everything that I'm saying is based on the experience that I had. So when you're watching this, I will have just finished my 4th full year if I include my PGCE year. If you don't want to include my PGCE year, it's 3 years of teaching. So this is kind of a few years ago. So this is based on what I can remember from my PGCE year. So let's get straight into it. And I'm going to start off with talking about my experience during my PGCE year. So the first thing that I'm going to say, and I'm going to start off with, is that your PGCE year is going to be an emotional roller coaster. I consider myself as being somebody that is somewhat quite confident. I'm a confident person in the sense that I'm passionate and I'm not a shy person. And even though I see myself as being this kind of person, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to walk into teaching and absolutely breeze through it. No! That was not the case for me, and it's not the case for many people. If you're doing your PGCE year and there isn't a moment where you find something difficult or you find something hard, then my kind of response would be, why are you doing this? Your PGCE year is a training year, and part of that training year is it's going to be a journey. You are going to learn things that you didn't already know. So with that, there are going to be times that you are going to find it, like I've said, somewhat of an emotional roller coaster. And out of all my years of teaching, so my PGCE NQT and all of the years after that, my PGCE year was by far the most emotional roller coaster of all, but that's okay. I think that people forget that a PGCE year is a training year, and you don't know what you don't know. I think that's the phrase. But basically, you're doing things for the first time. And when I did my PGCE year on my course, so to remind any of you that haven't watched the previous videos, I did a PGCE in secondary drama. And there was about 15 of us, I want to say. Let's say 15. And all of us had completely different experience. Personally, I had just come straight from doing my degree, and I'd got some experience volunteering in a secondary school, not teaching, but kind of supporting, observing. And that was the experience that I had. I had my degree, I had some volunteer experience, and that's it. Some people there had been teaching assistants. Some people had similar experiences to me. The general 3 types of people that I tend to find were people who had come straight out of a degree, like myself, people who had done their degree recently, had maybe worked in a school as a teaching assistant and then wanted to get their qualification, and other people that they'd done a degree a few years ago, they'd gone off to do other things, and now they wanted to become a teacher. And everybody is as passionate as everybody else in different ways. The thing to remember is that I honestly think, regardless of where you're coming from previously, you are all in the same boat. You might have worked in a school previously, maybe as a teaching assistant, but you shouldn't sit there and think, oh, I know more, I'm going to be a better teacher than the person sat next to me. And, you know, if you're sat there panicking and thinking, I've got nothing under my belt, no experience, don't worry, that's what your PGCE year is about. You're essentially learning how to become an independent teacher and how to absolutely excel in all those skills that you already don't know. That's going to be your year. It's going to be your year of highs and lows, learning skills that you had never learned before. So, during my PGCE year, I found, like I've said, an emotional roller coaster. And I found it an emotional roller coaster because there are going to be moments that you find this difficult. and that's okay. Like I've already said, I would be very impressed if you're somebody that's done your PGCE year and you've absolutely breezed the whole way and you haven't come across an obstacle. Because teaching will always have some form of obstacles. And when you're starting off, things that are small obstacles will seem a lot bigger because you might not have the practice with how to deal with that obstacle. So, how did I cope when it came towards the emotional roller coaster of my PGCE year? I'm going to tell you. So first and foremost, how I coped. I'm going to try not to use the word coped. And I don't want to use survived. How I overcame these obstacles. Let's reframe it as that. So how I overcame these obstacles during my PGCE year is by being organised. Organisation is such a big thing when it comes towards all aspects of teaching, and I'm quite fortunate that I am quite an organised person anyway, and it kind of comes naturally to me. But even more so, I knew I had to be more organised, but actually a lot more strict with myself. And the reason why I'm going to talk about being more strict with yourself is that it's learning to be organised but using your time wisely. For example, one of the biggest questions that I get asked at the moment when it comes towards PGCE is how did you find a balance during your PGCE year? Did you work during your PGCE year? Did you manage to find time for family? All of these questions. And I'm not going to lie and sit here and say it was an absolute breeze, because I did struggle. I remember the first few months that I kind of imagine like a child who is dug inside a book, and it's just kind of, you can't even see them. That was kind of me for the first few weeks or months of my PGCE year, because I am a perfectionist and I wanted to nail everything. So I was spending a lot of time on it. I was spending a lot of time on my lesson plans, and at first I found that a lot of my time was centred around my PGCE year. However, in reflection, there's lots of things that I did later on in my PGCE year, actually from about a third of the way in, that thinking about now, I think, why didn't I do that at the start? Why did it take me a third of the way in my PGCE year to change my outlook on being organised and managing my time? I don't know. My first thing is this. Can you have a job during your PGCE year? Yes, but like I've said, you've got to be organised. Can you have a life outside of your PGCE year? Yes, but again, you've got to be organised. It all comes around the idea of being organised, and being organised with your time and being strict with yourself. So one of the things that I found during my PGCE year is that I know I spent most of my weekdays doing work, and I would tend to be planning or doing assignments or some sort of PGCE work, whether it's teaching placement or not, most evenings. But it's about managing your time and using it effectively. Try to, if you can, I wish I'd have done, see things as they unfold. When you get more confident, I think you can. I learned when I got more confident in the basics and with planning and how to make the most of my time, which I'm going to make a video about this, about planning and organisation. I was able then to get more ahead of myself, which helped me a lot. So I wasn't having to spend as much time with planning. But at the start of your PGCE year, try to focus more on things that are coming up in the short term. I'm not saying now, because people are going to be saying, you always say plan ahead. I'm not saying don't plan ahead, but what I'm saying is that there's no point you sitting there on a Monday night time and thinking, oh, I've got to do this for tomorrow, this for next week, this for 2 weeks, this for a month. It's not going to help you. And I found myself being like, oh my God, I've got all these things coming up. And that's where my mental health started to kind of just go, because I was putting too much expectation on myself and too much stress, and it wasn't useful. And did I get round to doing it? Yes. Did I complete it to the best of my ability? Yes. Remember that during your PGCE year, it's about that balance. And if you don't have that break away from doing work, Teaching is very emotionally, mentally and physically demanding, and if your mind is always all the time focused on work, I think that it doesn't allow your perspective to change. And during your PGCE year, you'll find that you'll have moments where things click, and that's because your perspective has changed, because you've come away from something, reflected on it, had time away from it, and you've come back and done it again, and it's like, oh wow, that's how simple it was, or that's how I can resolve it. But if your mind is constantly thinking about how can I improve, and I've got to spend all my time planning, and because this is really important, I fell into that trap. You know, you're not alone if you do, but try to be strict with your time. So one way you might do this, for example, sticking to a time that you do work up until every day or in your week. So for myself, during my PGCE year, I decided that I wouldn't do work past 8 o'clock. And the reason why is that I needed 2 hours of downtime. I also not only decided that I would stop working at 8 p.m. every night, and that was the latest, by the way. Like, when it came around to 8 p.m, I went, no, not doing anymore, done, shut. And I also made sure that on a Saturday, I didn't do any work. Did nothing towards my PGCE year. I started this after Christmas. I'll be honest, in my first few weeks and months, I wasn't great at doing this because I'm a perfectionist and I wasn't using my time wisely. But actually, my Saturdays were spent doing things that I wanted to do or needed to do outside of my PGCE year. And that is something that I've actually continued even now. I make sure on my weekends that the one day that I do nothing towards work, don't answer emails, don't go on my laptop, don't look at anything towards teaching, is a Saturday. And like I've said already, I think for your own mental health, I'm not an expert on mental health, I'm just coming from my perspective, that being able to have a day that you completely switch off from it allows you to refresh your mind and your perspective. So when you go back to it, it looks fresh. And also having time that you, and I kind of had to ask my family sometimes to do this. If I was talking too much about work on days that I had off, I said, could you remind me, because I don't want it to be niggling in the back of my brain. And I know a lot of people worry about, am I going to be able to spend time with my family if people have got children? I don't, so I'm not in that situation. I'm going to be able to spend time with my friends, my hobbies. Yes, you are, but it's about organising your time. And I know that probably sounds maybe condescending to people, but it's about organising your time effectively, not saying, right, I'm going to do planning when I get back from work 6 till 8. Planning on what? Be specific with your time. What are you going to do during those 2 hours? And actually, what's beneficial of doing? So I kind of, when it comes towards planning and working towards things, I kind of have in my own mind, I sometimes write it down, it helps me to think about things that I need to do and be really honest with what you need to do. So things, if you're sat there on an evening, what do I desperately need to do for tomorrow? Those are the things you should do first, and you know what those things are. Then you kind of have the, oh, I'd like to, so things that it's not a must, but it's a could, it's, oh, I could do this to get ahead of things. And then things that if you want to be an absolute superstar, to get ahead of time, woo, I can do those things. During your PGCE year, you're going to find you're in that first category at the start. You're going to find that I need to do this for the next day, because if I don't do this, I won't be able to go into work the next day and teach and do what I need to do. Don't try to be a superhero and get through everything like that too ahead of yourself, because you will find with practice and with time, you'll become more confident anyway with your planning, and this will naturally form. So my honest advice when you start your PGCE year, think about maybe for each evening what you need to do and the things you could do. Focus on the need things. And like I've said, have breaks away from it. So, you can spend time with your friends, you can spend time with your family, your loved ones, do things you want to do. And it's important because, like I've said, it's all about your perspective towards things. Criticism and feedback is something that you are regularly going to receive during your PGCE year, and this is something that I know can impact some people's mental health, their confidence, their self-esteem towards, am I doing things right? And I know that I occasionally fell into that bracket. I fell into that perspective of thinking, I'm not a good teacher, I don't know what I'm doing. And now I kind of say to myself, it wasn't silly thinking that, because obviously in the time that's how you feel, but recognize that even everybody makes mistakes. And I think that during your PGCE year, you can put a lot of pressure on yourself that you feel like you need to be accomplishing everything from day one. And that's not going to happen. You know, I will keep going back to the concept of learning to drive. You know, I've been driving for years, and there's lots of things now that become second nature because I've had practice in them. But if I roll back into my first few lessons of driving, I couldn't have done everything that I do now. You're not going to go and do all your maneuvers straight away. It's just not possible. Criticism and feedback is there to help, obviously, but also to stretch you. And your mentors, your tutors actually have experience, and they're giving you their perspective on how they are more effective in their own teaching practice. And all teachers are different, and it's suggestions, and they're not sitting there and saying, this is the way you must manage your classes. This is the way you... I don't think teaching in a lot of things are things that are set in stone. So for example, when it comes towards how you might create your lesson plans, your school might have a certain structure, in fairness, which is recommended. The way everybody teaches is different. That's what I'm trying to say, that the way they teach suits them. So they're giving you suggestions and feedback of what you could do to suit you. And it might be things that they've done that might suit you. I had some amazing guidance during my PGCE year. One of the big things I take away, especially during my second placement, is planning. Oh my gosh, I remember it was kind of like a lesson from my mentor about this is how I plan, this is how I'm effective with it, and this is how I look at things, because I was creating lots of schemes of learning, which was a massive bonus that I had going into my NQT year. I'm going to do again a video on this very, very shortly about effective planning. And when I kind of learnt this, I was like mind blown. I was like, wow. I was like, oh my God, thank you so much. And it was so useful that I even use that today. Obviously lots of things I've learned, but that kind of way of looking at planning, I even use today. So criticism and feedback is there to stretch you, and they are qualified. And you might sit there and feel like, I don't think they're necessarily right. You've got to be very mindful during your PGCE year that sometimes you might sit there and think, I thought I'd done a really good job. And it's not them there saying, that's rubbish. It's thinking about different ways that you can develop your teaching practice. Even now, you get observed. Observations don't stop when you are qualified. They're not as often. But you're still going to get observed, and everybody's got their opinion. I get it now, and I have it with my head of department, and who is so polite, and I love the fact that they always come from the perspective, and they always approach it in the sense of, oh, I've never thought about it doing it in this way. Have you ever thought of trying it, doing it like this, and seeing if the outcome was any different? That is not them saying that what you were doing is wrong. When it comes towards your mental health, I think during your PGCE year, that sometimes people can see it as criticism and feedback, that I'm doing everything wrong and I'm not a good teacher. It's not that at all. Like I've said, it's an emotional journey during your PGCE year, and the feedback is there to stretch you and help you to progress and develop. Just be mindful that you are amazing. But like I've said, coming back to driving, you're not going to know what you don't know yet, and it will start to click. So how did I feel during the end of my PGCE in regards to my own mental health? Like I've said, I'm just going to keep referring it back towards it being an emotional roller coaster. And there were times that I cried, there were times that I smiled, there were times that I was angry, and during those times there were times that I really struggled. And I'm going to be real and honest with you that I remember calling friends, speaking to family about it. But when I got to the end of the PGCE year, that like I've said, I realised that that was all part of the journey. The ways that I improved my own mental health during that time is consistently reminding myself of, I'm not going to be perfect at the very beginning. Things take time. I can speak, people are there to speak to, ask for advice and be honest with how I'm feeling. You know, they're there to support you, they're not to put you down. I'm going to learn things. I've done my PGCE because I want to learn, and ironically, being part of a teacher, we teach pupils that, you know, I'm not going to call it failure. When you get things wrong, that allows you to realise how you can do it right. This is something that I say to my pupils all the time that I teach, that getting it wrong isn't a bad thing. It allows us to realise how we can grow from that. If we don't have that same mantra in our PGCE year, we're not going to be practicing what we preach. So hopefully this has been a chatty, somewhat insightful video towards how I coped during my PGCE year towards my own mental health, and how I coped, survived, how I found things. I'm going to be creating another video that is an updated version of my mental health when it comes towards my NQT year and even now. However, I wanted to separate them as I feel like some of the concepts that I'm going to be talking about during my PGCE year are different to what I'm kind of experiencing now. There's lots of crossovers, but there are some differences. So I hope today's video has been useful. If there's any questions that you have, I've tried to generally cover most things. Please feel free to comment below and I'll try to get back to you as soon as you can. I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.